All right, everybody. I'm gonna go over. This is the first one I'm doing of this, so I'm just gonna kind of do a slight introduction. So the idea is this series is this week in the field. So once a week, I'm looking to try to review my jobs, give you guys an idea of what I do on a weekly basis, because it kind of is all over the place. I'm gonna try to bring up prices for some of this stuff. Bear with me as I try to go through some of it. But I'll give you an idea of how sometimes it can be very busy and sometimes it is not busy at all. So this past week, we started off on Monday. The only thing I had was I had a quick estimate in the morning for a pair of bifold doors that had some water damage on the bottom, and the knobs that they had on the doors themselves were actually, they popped off. So those they want the entire set of the two sets of doors replaced. So I ended up sending an estimate for that. That included replacing the doors, staining the doors because they're not white, new hardware. I had to source the actual knobs because they wanted the knobs to match the kitchen cabinets, because these bifolds are for a laundry room that's in there. I did send that estimate out. It did get approved. Sometimes I'm a couple days behind on sending out estimates, but I try to send them out as soon as I can. And I do have pretty good luck getting them approved. However, most of the time I'm not scheduling the work for at least a couple weeks from the time that the estimates are getting approved, just because of my current workload. So that was on Monday. On Tuesday, I had a house that I went to. It's a new construction house. The customers that I should have said this before. The customer on Monday is an existing customer. I've done a bunch of stuff for their house. On Tuesday, also an existing customer. This customer had it's a new construction house. They have they've been slowly trying to upgrade some of the builder grade stuff inside of their house. So I've done some things in the past, like swap out door handles and not door handles at their house, but hinges. They went from like brushed nickel hinges to black hinges, things like that. And I've done some other minor things here or there, but this week, or this time around, I haven't worked for them in about a year, but this time around I specifically was replacing 6 vanity lights, so the light bars that are above a mirror. There was 2 in one bathroom, 1 in a powder room, 2 in another bathroom. There was six of them total. Yeah, six light fixtures total that got replaced. I'm trying to remember where the other one was, but I can't recall. But oh, there was another single bathroom, like a princess suite, if you know what that is. It's a bathroom attached to a single bedroom, but it's not a master bedroom. So there's 6 lights. They also had a couple of other minor things. When I was there about a year ago, they had a couple of other things that needed to get done, including they had a light bulb that was out in their wall oven. There was light bulbs out for the exhaust fan above their cooktop, and they had an issue with their pull-out cabinet that had the 2 garbage cans in it. It wasn't fully pulling out, and because it wasn't fully pulling out, they couldn't get the garbage can in the back to be actually removed. So when I was there about a year ago, I gave them all of the parts and said, if you want to get the stuff, this is what you would need. I tried to do that sometimes because some customers that I have, they prefer to buy the parts, and some customers, they just want me to take care of everything. This customer wanted the parts, so they had the light bulbs and they had the pull-out cabinet attachment. So I replaced the cabinet pull-out, and we're going to try to plug in some pictures, but it's just simple things of what it is. There was a light bulb. I replaced the light bulb in the oven and replaced the 2 light bulbs in the overhead ventilation fan, or the range hood, and that was that. So that customer, the total for them for that day was $600, and they ended up giving a $120 tip as well. I don't get tips very often, but I do have some customers who do give tips, but that's mostly, I'm not asking for tips in any way, because I personally don't like the idea of tipping people, but I leave it as an option because some people believe that I'm undercharging for some of the services that I do. So I just leave it as an option when they're paying their invoice. And when I say that, that invoice specifically got sent out while I was already off site, and they got it, and there's just an option on there where if they want to put on a tip, they can. Like I said, it's like for every 50 customers, there's one maybe that leaves a tip. So that's just how it goes. All right, so then that whole day was about a total of 3.5 hours for that job, to give you an idea. So Wednesday, we went to a job that was actually a second day at this job. The week prior I was at this job. This one was a little bit further away. I was actually curious how the customer found out about me because it's kind of outside. So typically I try to stay within a 20 to 30 minute radius, driving distance or driving time wise of where I'm located. But it doesn't always work out like that because my name gets out there. A lot of my business comes from referrals. I do have a website and I do have a Google listing, but I don't promote it in any way. It just exists. So people find me, and I will sometimes ask people, especially when it's a further away job, I'll ask, how did you find out about me? This customer specifically said that they found me on Google and they called a couple of other companies that were closer, and I was the only one who called back. So I got the work just because I called back. But essentially what the job was they had a TV mount. It was an old mount. Okay. Wow, okay. Okay, well, I guess the light that I had for a long time just decided to crap out while I'm sitting here today. But anyway, going back to what I was talking about, this job that I was specifically tasked to do was they had a TV that was wall mounted on an interior wall, and they were trying to rearrange their furniture to make some space for a kitchen table. And in turn, basically the way it ended up working was they wanted to move the TV to the opposite wall, which was an exterior wall. The house was built in the 50s. I was not aware of this, or I was not aware of the situation I was about to come into, but when I was there 2 weeks ago, the mount that they had, they asked to reuse the mount, but the issue became that the mount itself was old version. I didn't really like the design, and it had a weird tilt to it that I couldn't adjust. And it also was a very difficult mount. It was intended for 2 people to lift, not 1 person. But it was more of a safety concern with the mount itself, because the mount was not, it was secure on the wall. That's not the issue. The issue was that it literally had like 1 point of holding it. The brackets, instead of sitting and then locking the brackets in like most mounts, they had a single screw holding the mount to the back of the TV, which I wasn't a fan of. So I really wasn't super comfortable with guaranteeing my work by using that same mount. So I told them I would order a new mount and then come back. There was also an issue because when I initially got the job, they did not tell me there was a sound bar, and they wanted a sound bar installed below, which they had the mount for, so there wasn't an issue with that. It was more of the mount for the TV wasn't going to work. So when I came back with the new mount, the issue became the mount itself had no issues, but when I was using my stud finder on the wall, I could not find studs, and it was weird. Every time a stud would pop up, the stud would disappear, literally like an inch over, or not even an inch, 1/4 of an inch over. It would just disappear, and I would go back, and suddenly it was like there was ghost studs in the wall. Turns out the wall itself was a block wall that had strapping over the block to put 2 layers of drywall on top of it. So it kept reading the strapping as a stud, but it wasn't deep enough. And I didn't realize this. So when I put the mount on, I had to screw in multiple holes, and that did not work very well. That mount ultimately had I got 2 of them in and it was solid, but when I tried to put some weight on it, one of the top ones popped out, so I had to adjust everything to move over. This was before I even found out about the strapping. The reason I found out about the strapping is because they wanted the wires concealed in the wall and an electric run from an existing outlet up to a new outlet behind the TV, so they didn't have any cords. When I cut the hole for my box that I would put in, which is right here, you can buy these at Home Depot. They also have them online, but this box would not fit. It did not have the depth. There was literally probably, this box has the electric box that goes on the back of this, and that box, there was no way it was going to fit. So because of that, I had to, the customer was home that day, and the day before, the time I was there before, it was her mother who was there. So I talked to the customer, explained that there really wasn't a way to, one, feel confident with the bracket that was installed on the wall, since there wasn't actual studs deep enough to hold the weight of the TV. And then there was no way to put the electrical. So I essentially suggested doing a bump out, basically making a faux wall on the inside of the existing wall. And then by doing that, it gives you the space that you need. It also gives you the structural support for the mount. There's just a lot more involved in that than originally what I was telling them they were going to do. So the original quote was for $540, I think, and that included the running the electrical, putting in the box, mounting the TV, getting everything hooked up, and then mounting the sound bar as well, including concealing the wires. Because of the situation I ran into with the TV itself, or the mount itself, I was already over on my time that I had allotted for this. Most of the time I don't have additional jobs scheduled. I try to pick things up if I can. Someone calls me and says, can you take care of something today? I try to fit those in if I have the time, but I try to make sure that I leave myself enough time for odd scenarios to occur. This day specifically, I was supposed to have, this was supposed to be like 3 hours max. I was at 2 hours, and all I had at this point was a hole in the wall and the mount on the wall. And I wasn't even confident with the mount, the way it was mounted. So it wasn't a great scenario. I basically, and I felt bad because essentially I had done all this, spent all this time doing this, but at this point I had nothing to really show for it because I didn't even want to leave the mount on the wall the way it was. So I talked to the customer, suggested this bump out. They specifically said that they would talk to their husband about potentially doing it. Whether they do it or not, we'll wait and find out. I'll give you an update if, once I have one, but essentially that's essentially what happened. We ended up taking the new mount, putting it back on the interior wall and putting the TV up so that it was mounted properly with the new mount. And then we taped off all the holes. Here's a picture of what we ended up doing. When I say we, I mean me, but I always talk in the terms of we because we is the business. I have some people occasionally that work with me, but most of the time it is me, but I always say we. It's just what I've grown accustomed to. It also just makes you sound more official when you're talking to a customer on the phone. But then once they get an idea that it is just you, they don't have an issue with it. So it's not like you're, lying or anything like that. You're not. You're just saying we because it is a business. It's not just, Joe Schmo who's looking for cash under the table. That's not what my business is. So anyway, so ultimately I ended up charging $300. That was just literally to cover the cost of the mount and the mounting. And then just a little bit of extra time as essentially diagnostic work for this potential work that she would do in the future. And we'll see what happens with that. So that was Wednesday. Then I had a number of different things that came up. I was going through, I wouldn't say necessarily slow, but just less work as usual where I could book out stuff maybe the following week, which I am not typically able to do. But then I had a onslaught of a bunch of stuff that came in at the last, just last week. So I had an existing customer who's selling their house. They have some work that needs to get done. I had another customer contact me about doing some work because they're selling. This is a new customer. New customer contacted me because they're selling their house and they're looking at doing some work at their house before they sell. One of the property managers that I had also had 2 different projects that came up, which one of them I ended up taking care of in this week, which we'll get to in a second, and then another one that I'll be doing in the following week. But all of that stuff came in like literally a matter of a couple hours. And then there was also another customer who was a referral from one of my existing customers who had a project. That one didn't end up happening because his wife ended up hiring somebody before we had scheduled a time for me to come out. So it just didn't end up working out. That said, so we move over to Thursday. The new customer. So this new customer contacted me. This was through a job request on my website. They specifically gave me pictures, which is always super helpful. I called them, set up this estimate. So I went over there, walked with her around the house, and looked over what needs to get taken care of. There's a bunch of different things. This is another new construction house. Where I live, where I live and operate out of is a town that has a lot of expensive new construction houses. Some are worth way more than others, but there are houses that range anywhere from like $400,000 up to over $1 million. Most of the houses I end up working in are in the $700,000 to maybe $600,000 to $800,000 range. But not everybody's always hiring because most people are not necessarily thinking about maintaining stuff until it's brought to their attention by either a realtor because they're selling or because of something else that happens, like some sort of catastrophe type situation where there was a storm and there was water and they had a sump pump go bad and things like that. Most of the houses in the area, people assume that there's not much they have to do because it's a new construction house, and then they find out in the worst case scenario that there is definitely things that they need to take care of. So this job specifically, she's selling her house. She's moving to something a little bit smaller, and there was some various trim work that needed to get done. There was some trim that was damaged that needs to be just basically swapped out. She has the trim. There was a piece of trim over the kitchen sink that just had gotten some water damage on it from just, when you put your hand by the faucet to turn it on and off. There was a Anderson in-swing patio door that has a active lock mechanism, which is the lock that clicks at the bottom and the top when you hit the deadbolt in the middle, and it's not working correctly. You try the door and it doesn't actually latch. So when you close the door, unless you actually put the deadbolt in, the door won't stay closed. There was a window screen that was damaged that needs to get replaced, and then because it's an Anderson window, it's not as simple as just, this isn't a screen that's damaged. It's more of the frame itself is extremely bent. There was some baseboard there was some baseboard in the basement that was damaged. They had some water that came in. They ended up replacing all of the flooring with new carpet, but the baseboards have a tiny water stain, so that needs to get primed and painted. There was 2 door frames pieces that need to get replaced because they just had nicks. The one downfall about a lot of the new construction area is that they're using MDF trim and it damages super easily. It gets nicks. It just gets worn so badly. Worst trim in the world, but unfortunately it's cheaper than normal wood, so most builders choose to use it, which is unfortunate. I've had a couple of jobs where I've literally ripped out a ton of trim and just replaced trim in people's houses because of this exact reason. So there was that. That estimate I ended up sending over the weekend. That estimate was about $1,900 for everything. Part of that is because the active lock mechanism, if it needs to be replaced, is like $350 by itself. And then the rest of it, there was also a drywall repair in the garage. They had a hole cut in to fix a leak and there was a hole in the wall that was also fixed. They just need to get patched and painted. And I might be forgetting something else, but eventually when that work comes up in the next couple of weeks, I'll cover it again. So that was in the morning. Then I had I had part of my day blocked out because I had to get an oil change in my truck, and then I had a job in the evening. Now I don't typically work evenings, but occasionally, especially with property managers, when they send me things that are, rentals, there's not always somebody there during the day. The work still needs to get done. The property manager has no issue with paying, the service trip. They don't hem and haw about the service trip that I charge and things like that. So it's not a concern. This scenario was, the work order was that there was a sink faucet knob that was broken that needed to be replaced. Simple enough, just need the knob. So I was told as a sink faucet. I got in touch with the tenant. They sent me a picture of the knob. The knob was a Moan single cartridge faucet. And then the only follow-up on that was that there was also, they asked if they could get their toilet seat replaced, and that was approved. So I just need get a picture of the toilet seat in order to figure out the shape so that I could bring a new toilet seat. So I had the knob, had the toilet seat, showed up, went into the bathroom, and the sink faucet was 2 handles, not a single handle. Look over at the shower, and it turns out the knob was supposed to be, that was broke, was for the shower, which was a problem because I didn't have a knob for a shower. When I looked, the knob that she had was in fact for a sink, but it was at some point replaced with the wrong knob. So it had the incorrect knob on the shower. So it was just a worst case scenario, as it sometimes happens, where the knob itself was in fact a sink one. I was told it was a sink one, but it was actually for a shower. So that sucked because that job was about 30 minutes away from me, and it was going to require a return trip because, unfortunately, because of the time and also because of where the job is, there is not a Home Depot nearby, so I can't just get extra pieces. I had the parts that I thought I needed, but it wasn't the right ones. And then swapped out the toilet seat. I took the old knob with me. I actually put the Moan handle, which is sitting right here. I put this on the shower for the time being, just so that they could use it, because they were using a wrench to change the temperature of that, which is not ideal. And told them I would try to find the correct part and then get back to them. I was able to get the part the following day, and texted them and let them know that I had the right one. And just to be safe, I actually had 3 different ones. It was for a Delta faucet or cartridge, and there was 3 different ones at Home Depot, and I just brought all 3 just in case, just so that I didn't have to make another trip. So that was Thursday. So Friday was, in the morning, I had a job extremely local, only about 10 minutes away. That job was, a customer had a bathroom exhaust fan that they tried to replace on their own. They had an issue where they weren't comfortable messing with the electrical, wanted somebody else to come in. So I went out, and I did estimate that job just because it was a new customer. It was not somebody I previously worked for. Gave them an estimate of just my minimum service charge, which is $150, and then basically went out there, had that done within an hour. No additional charges. It got paid. There wasn't any issues with the fan. The only thing that was unfortunate about the fan was that when he cut the hole, he cut it just slightly too big. So there's just like a tiny spot that needs to get patched, and then just painted. But he also had handprints over the ceiling, so it's very likely he's going to have to paint the ceiling anyway, if that's something that they want to do. One of the things that I run into a lot when I meet new customers is after I interact with them and they learn about how my business works, and it's just me and who I am, and see the type of person that I am, see my work, they immediately start asking what else I do. This customer specifically said, "Do you do ceiling fans?" And I do ceiling fans. So he said that there might be a ceiling fan that they need replaced in the future. Now, you know, most of the time I do hear back from the customers. It just takes some time because some customers have to budget. Some customers want things done right away. It's just how it ends up working. But for the most part, there's very few customers who don't call back because they did something wrong. It's more of they don't call back because of budget constraints is most of the time what the issue is. So then later in that day, I had a customer who lives a little bit further out, about 45 minutes away, but they almost have like an ongoing list of stuff that needs to get done at the property. They've been out of town for the past month, and their list has grown pretty long. So they were calling to find out if I could take care of a couple of the things that we had talked about previously, going back to the last time I was out there was New Year's Day. And specifically what I was there to take care of was he had an issue with a Ring doorbell not being able to charge. So I was bringing extra Ring batteries and a charger that I had gotten online. He wanted a cosmetic / magnifying mirror installed by his vanity. So I found one on Amazon that lit up. It had a rechargeable battery that you can, you know, collapse down into the wall. And then there was, the main thing was he had a shower head. So he had a sharper image mirror that actually connected to it, a little attachment on the shower head, so that it would run hot water through this hose around the mirror so the mirror wouldn't fog up. So when he shaves in the shower, the mirror wouldn't fog up and he could use it. Now, there's other options out there. There's anti-fog mirrors, there's things like that. I found something, so essentially the issue was that it was broke and it was squirting water off into the side. So he wanted it to get replaced. And then I had told him about the shower head, because if I was going to be replacing a bunch of these attachments, I suggested a shower head. He's not that old, but he is obviously getting up there in age. He's probably late 50s, early 60s, and I suggested just getting a new shower head that's magnetic. Moan makes I think it's called like Magnic Tech or something like that, where it just clips on. So instead of having to like get the shower head to clip into it or slide into it or have to reach up higher, you can just pull it and it has a magnet on it. I've installed those for a lot of customers, older customers who are looking to make things more accessible for them. So I just suggested that because it was an easy thing to do since I was going to be taking apart everything else, and it's really just the added cost of the parts. So that's the other thing. Take out the mirror attachment, take out the old shower head, replace the other shower head. While I was there, there was also, I think that was it. Oh, and then install a new one of these shading mirrors for a shower. The new one that I found was just, it sticks onto the wall. So you put it at the right height, it sticks onto the wall, you can adjust it. It has like an articulating bracket that moves back and forth, and you can basically just keep it there, and then you actually put hot water in the top and it just runs the hot water down the back to keep the glass from fogging up, because it keeps it the same temperature as the outside air. And then I had to check a Ring camera on his porch that I previously installed that had some issues with the solar panel. There's, for some reason, because of the weather and it just being very cloudy, for whatever reason, the battery hasn't been charging enough with the solar panel. I don't prefer Ring products. I personally use Google, and I have 2 Google cameras that are powered by solar panels that I've never had an issue with the power, no matter how dark it is outside on a regular basis, especially in winter. I've had them installed in my house for 3-4 years maybe, and I've never had an issue with the batteries running down. So I'm not exactly sure why this Ring one's not working the way the Google ones do, but it's essentially the same thing. It's just has a power source and it's not powering correctly. So I took a look at that, swapped out the battery with a fully charged battery, so that way there's, it doesn't have that same issue. So that was essentially that job. very small things. They did have one thing that came up that got added to their list, which was they have a bathtub diverter upstairs that's not sealing correctly, that they want replaced in the future. So that just gets added to the list of about 6 or 7 other things that they had on their list that just require more time. There's some little drywall repairs here or there. There's some painting that needs to be done, but none of these things are pressing for them. They only want the stuff that's pressing done right away. So that total bill was, I believe, $720, but that includes 2 previous visits to their property as well that I had not billed them for because there really just wasn't that much to bill them for the last 2 visits. And they never have any issues with getting their bill paid, and I just don't like sending them bills for smaller amounts for when I do hardly anything. These clients have me, this client specifically has me take care of a variety of other things, like the one time they had a storage room that had some stuff removed and just, disposed of. So I would sift through it back at my shop and either make a pile for Goodwill, make a pile that's garbage, make a pile for, other, if it was electronics or recycling facility. One thing that I try to do a lot is that when I get stuff from jobs, you could just chuck it, but I separate a lot of it. So I'm a big proponent of recycling as much as possible. So I have buckets of copper or brass or wires that I can take to the scrap. I get nothing for them. It's more of just trying to not have this stuff end up in a landfill as much as possible. I have these buckets in here, and these buckets are just here for literally sorting out recycling or garbage or other things. I actually need to be making a trip to the scrapyard very soon because I've got too many buckets and too much random stuff that's taking up space. So there's that. So that was essentially Friday. Saturday, I ended up going back to that rental with the knob, had the correct knob, was there for literally about not even 5 minutes. It took hardly any time at all. And then after that, I had to take a look at something on the exterior of the building that the property manager wanted me to take a look at, which was there's railings, aluminum railings that are in concrete there's a total of 3 stairs. So there's a landing and then it goes into the door. There's an overhang up above and there's support posts that go up. They're also aluminum. The support posts and the railings where they connect to the ground have rusted very badly. On one side, they're not even connected at all, so it's a safety hazard. I saw this at a different point when I was there and told the property manager about it, and they had said they wanted a quote for this, so I needed to take measurements for that. And then there was another issue where there was a boiler or I'm not as familiar with this because I don't do a lot of this stuff, but it looks like a tankless water heater on the inside, but it turns out it has something to do with the heating, and it is part of the system that actually heats the entire building. I don't have any idea how any of that stuff works, but purposefully what I was being told was that there was an issue where there was a cover missing. Here's a picture of that. There was a cover missing from the outside where the intake and the exhaust out was for this boiler. That's what I was told. I don't know anything about it. Took a picture of it, looked it up to try to figure out what it was, and essentially it looks like there's some sort of cap that's supposed to go over it to prevent cold air from touching it. That way the ice doesn't build up, because if there's too much ice, it actually shuts the tank down because it's not getting enough air inside. So that's another thing I have to figure out, is just what cover I need to get. Ended up sending out an estimate for the railings and the supports to make it all, up to basically new standards, but it also included replacing a little bit of rotted wood over on the overhang and then painting the overhang, and that was $2,400. The actual job for replacing the knob and the toilet seat with materials was $245, and that was only because there was that second trip and it had nothing to do with it wasn't necessarily any one person's fault. It was just, it required 2 trips. There was a return trip involved. Obviously, my service fee fluctuates to the point where I'm not going to charge 150 for the first visit and 150 for the second visit. And literally I'm only on site for maybe 15 minutes between both visits because it just doesn't seem right. And also I have a feeling that if you did that, property managers would think that you're just too expensive. So try not to do that. But that's essentially the week. I don't typically work on Saturdays. I only did that because I was trying to make sure that I got that taken care of also so I could bill it. But that was essentially, that was this week in the field for me. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm hoping that things that I've said will lead you guys to ask some questions, and then I'll answer those questions in this week in the field. Like I said, I'm hoping to do this once a week to give you guys an idea of my jobs, what I specifically come in contact with. This coming week that I have a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on this next week, so hopefully you guys will be back, and we'll see you guys next time.